My name is Chris Stute, and this is my oral presentation for the Positions and Practice module of Falmouth's MA in Photography. In this presentation, I will discuss my past practice, albeit limited, my present practice, and where my ambitions are for future development and research. But before doing so, it is important to understand the self, i.e. a little more about me. I was an only child, and in a family where my parents believed that the only future to be considered was to be proficient in the sciences and mathematics. The humanities, including art, did just not feature, and so I found myself channeled into studying medicine. Having qualified, I joined the Royal Navy, and in 1982 found myself travelling south in an aircraft carrier to the Falklands War. I did take a camera and did attempt to do some war photography. What a shame Don McCullen was not allowed to travel south with the task force, a valuable talent missed. My photography merely recorded what was around me, such as the fleet travelling south. Or as here, a picture of a casualty being treated in our medical centre. You can see the carbon on his face from the explosion of an Exocet missile hitting his ship. But it was this picture of our return to the UK which made me think about the conflict between triumphalism and the tragedy and obscenity of war. There was so much I could have considered in the construction and contact of my photographs, an opportunity missed, and within the context of me just pointing and clicking. But those thoughts quickly receded into a dormant state until recently, when viewing McCullen, Kappa and others has rekindled those thoughts of some 37 years ago. And so to the present. Having rekindled my interest and now passion, I undertook a foundation course in photography, and which inevitably led me down the more technical route. My artistic knowledge and capabilities remained inadequate, and my academic study limited. Pierre Bourdieu said analog photographs were mostly made at occasions of family festivities, anniversaries, weddings, honeymoon trips, of babies and children, and alongside other notable events. Belongs to family function, where images serve to reinforce the family group. And that is exactly what I did. I like this image of a jazz duet performing on the beach, with the juxtaposition of the performers against the low tide seaweed. This scene looks at street partying, capturing the differing but linked individual fun. I have captured local scenes of an aesthetically pleasing nature. Interestingly, I have sold many of these, printed on a 4-foot by 3-foot canvas. And eventually I was asked to take PR shots for Newquay Airport as seen here. In fact, this image was designed to illustrate the collaboration between airline and airport. But I had arrived at a point where there was little artistic content. My photographs were lacking in that respect. They were in effect snapshots and at best documentary. And so I began to explore a number of different genres and topics. Robert Frank said, "There is one thing the photograph must contain, the humanity of the moment." And so I began to develop a differing approach, here capturing the extraordinary bond between my son and his dog. Or a tender moment seen here between my daughter and her daughter. I have now begun to experiment with technique, here using a long exposure to capture the frenetic activity of getting a theatre set ready for production. I have begun to, as it were, keep my eyes open and spotted this scene in London which depicts the way we are all watched in our modern lives. And here an image depicting the blur, colours and noise of the commute on the tube. Some situations are amusing and worthy of capture, as here an image of a mermaid's chair looking out to sea. This makes people think, an activity so important in photography. And so to the future, how I want to develop and what I am researching. My ambition is to combine my work in vocational mental health with photography, in a sense the collaboration between the two disciplines. Despite recent improvements, there is still a need to highlight the pressing issues around mental health. Much work needs to be done, and I see photography assisting and enhancing that process. Within that context, and in terms of collaboration as well as participation, the work of Antonio Vera is particularly relevant, and where control of the process is vested in the subject themselves. His work has, without question, greatly influenced me and has begun to change how I think about my future practice. This is not just about collaboration, but also participation. What I'm already doing is giving patients a camera each. They then take photographs of places, people, objects, and so on that have been an important part of their clinical journey. They are also writing down their stories and what they want to say to the world. I will then work on my own photographic interpretation. This may include portraiture or more abstract metaphors, such as in this image, which is an interpretation of a patient's state of dissociation. We will then work together to produce what would be best described as a triptych. 1/3 would be their compilation, 1/3 their story, and 1/3 my own interpretation, combining to form one piece. The aim is to empower the patients by allowing them to speak out openly and honestly about what they have achieved, and to be able to celebrate their success, with all of this being communicated through the photographic medium. As Susan Sontag said in On Photography, to take a photograph is to participate in another person's or thing's mortality, vulnerability, and mutability. My relationship with my patients is not just personal, it is intimate. This gives me a unique insight into the person and the power to capture their feelings, emotions, fears, joys, and so on. However, it also gives rise to ethical issues, and ultimately for me to always protect my patients' welfare. Susan Sontag also said, there is something predatory in the act of taking a picture. To photograph people is to violate them, by seeing them as they never see themselves, by having knowledge of them that they can never have. It turns people into objects that can be symbolically possessed. The issue of power is important, and it is something which must not be abused. Inclusion and participation, though, are important aspects, as is professional self-efficacy and control, something integral to my clinical work. Dorothea Lange said, the camera is an instrument that teaches people how to see without a camera. And in all our lives, medical or otherwise, we need to be able to see without a camera, to perceive and interpret, to interact, and without prejudice or discrimination. What I hope for the future is that my work will help people to do that. The outcome must be to improve awareness in mental health and to achieve an effective collaboration to facilitate that. The issues do need to be highlighted and in effect shouted from the rooftops, I believe. that effective photography can achieve such a thing.